This Read 180 topic is made possible by a grant from
Kellogg's Rice Krispies. Celebrating the joy of kids growing through interaction.
And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the annual financial support of viewers like you.
Have you ever believed in something but maybe felt kind of powerless, like, I'm only one person, what can I do? Well, it's a fact that one person can change history. I mean, look at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. His nonviolent fight to promote equality changed history and challenged people's beliefs. Your VJ Daniella has done some pretty intense research on the subject, so let's check out her videos.
We've all studied Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s work in the civil rights movement, and maybe you even know about who he was before he became famous. I didn't. So doing research about him for these videos, I learned a lot of new stuff about when he was a young man and his strong ideals and principles, about when he was a young man with a dream. Watch.
A young man with a dream.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is for all Americans a symbol of the power of peaceful protest. He waged a nonviolent fight for equal rights that began in 1955, and his message of peace still lives today. His feelings were rooted in his childhood in Atlanta, Georgia. His father, Martin Luther King Sr., was a minister who preached nonviolence, understanding, and love to his congregation and to his son. He also encouraged his son to value knowledge, and ML, as he was nicknamed, was an excellent and popular student. While in college, Martin studied the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi, who won India's fight for freedom from Great Britain through nonviolent demonstration and protest. That was 1948, the same year Martin turned 19 and was ordained a minister. Then, when he was only 25, he and his new wife, Coretta Scott, moved to Montgomery, Alabama, where Martin took over the ministry of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. Only 1 year later, he put into practice what he'd learned from both his father and Gandhi and began a fight for civil rights that would be King's peaceful battle for the rest of his life.
It's one thing to believe in nonviolence, but what happened to Dr. King when his beliefs were put to the test? What happened when he would no longer tolerate the injustice of segregation? Let's watch.
The Montgomery bus boycott.
Martin Luther King Jr. was a man who lived what he believed. In 1955, his lifelong belief in positive change through peaceful protest was put to the test. Blacks in Montgomery were forced by law to ride in the back of the bus. If the bus was full, they had to give up seats to white passengers. On December 1st, 1955, a woman named Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat and was arrested. Outraged, blacks refused to ride buses and began a bus boycott that would change history.
We, the Negro citizens of Montgomery, have been engaged in a nonviolent protest against injustices and indignities experienced on city buses.
Even when the protesters were harassed,
You two, boy, get off of here.
they continued their peaceful protest with quiet dignity.
There is nothing in the nonviolent discipline that says if you engage in nonviolent activity, you will not be the recipient of violence.
King's home was bombed and threats made on his life. After the 381-day peaceful but powerful protest, the Supreme Court ruled that bus segregation was illegal. This was only the first of many victories for Dr. Martin Luther King's message and methods, and it secured his place as a national respected leader. After the success of the Montgomery bus boycott in 1956, Dr. King continued to fight for civil rights. He was even arrested 39 times, once trying to get served at a lunch counter in Atlanta. Then, in 1963, he joined other civil rights leaders in organizing the March on Washington. Now, nearly 40 years later, we are still affected by that one day in history. Watch.
The March on Washington.
Dr. Martin Luther King's dream to end hatred, injustice, and violence, and for equal rights for all Americans, had been a strong influence in creating new legislation, the Civil Rights Act. To urge Congress to pass it, civil rights leaders organized the March on Washington. It was the largest march Washington had ever seen. Over 200,000 people came by train, bus, and plane and gathered in the mall that stretches from the Capitol to the Washington Monument. Young and old, black and white, rich and poor. There were speeches and singing, peaceful protest. In fact, it was so peaceful that arrests in Washington were below normal that day.
And if America is to remain a first-class nation, she can no longer have second-class citizens.
Dr. King's vision of unity, all people living together like brothers and sisters, became a reality on that day in Washington.
Shake hands with the person beside you.
And the Civil Rights Act also became a reality when it was signed the following year. It was another victory in the long fight to overcome and heal one of our nation's deepest scars. You guys have been with me since I started this job. And just between you and me, it's almost always a really good job. But recently, it was sort of bad. See, I got to put together a video including Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, one of the most beautiful and famous speeches of all time. That's the good part. But I had to keep it short. That's bad. So, since it couldn't be any longer, consider this just a small sample. Watch and dream along with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
I have a dream.
The March on Washington is one of the most memorable days in America's long battle for civil rights. As brothers and sisters joined in song and peace, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. took the podium and gave us a message that will inspire generations.
I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Free at last. You followed one man's march, and now you can head over to another topic.